The Eastern Conference swing continues as the New York Rangers will be heading to town on Saturday. We preview the matchup against the New York Rangers on today's episode of Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked On Wild.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we dive into the New York Rangers with Jonny Lazarus to take a look at how the Rangers have been doing under new head coach Peter Laviolette after moving on from Gerard Gallant in the offseason. We'll talk about the lethal special teams. And a couple of not too bad goalies either. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. As mentioned, we are talking Rangers with the Wild playing New York tomorrow and bringing in a friend of the show, Jonny Lazarus. You can find him on NHL.com. You can find him on Bleacher Report. You can find him on the Blue Crew podcast, as well as on the Hockey News, covering everything New York Rangers. Jonny, glad to have you back on the show here today. And at least to start the season, it is two teams going in a little bit of different directions.
Oh, yeah. I thought there might have been a follow-up there. Yes, two different directions. First of all, Seth, great to be here with you. Always fun hopping on with you. And as far as the teams go, yeah, I think the Rangers right now are kind of America's sweetheart. I think a lot of people disrespected them before the year started and had a lot of questions, which were fair questions, including me, about Peter Laviolette and just the shakeup of the team and Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere. And I think right now they're playing team hockey, which is good and which is fun to watch. Everyone's bought in, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more. But I want to ask you a question about your lovely Minnesota Wild, because I haven't tuned into many Wild games yet this year. I'm just now doing my research on the team. Is it a good or bad thing that Eriksson Ek is leading the team in scoring as we're recording right now?
I think at this point, I'll consider it a good thing. With the caveat that players that you expect, like Kirill Kaprizov, hasn't gotten going yet. Matt Boldy's been hurt. And so at the end of the season, you hope that those are going to be the guys that are leading. But this has been something that we haven't seen from this team as much over the last couple of years, is those other guys stepping up. That was a big problem at points last year. But Joel Eriksson Ek, you got Ryan Hartman with 6 goals so far this season. And so those guys offensively holding down the fort while Kaprizov gets himself into regular gear, and then Matt Boldy coming back. That part of it has been good, but as I'm sure you've seen, defense and goaltending, that has been an entirely different story for this team so far.
As I like to call it, the Minnesota Wild special teams right now is pee-pee poo-poo.
That's putting it mildly, and we'll talk about because I'm anxious to, and point blank, I'm just going to phrase it as, what's it like to have good special teams? I can't speak to that, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's get to the biggest change, as you talked about Peter Laviolette coming in, and yeah, I'm just going to push right through it. I'm just going to keep going to try to get through it. But hey, I'm right there with you. I can't stop. Like, I'm on the verge of cracking a laugh at that too. But Peter Laviolette comes in, and obviously you had Gerard Gallant over the last few seasons. What have you noticed as the biggest difference between the two? Because both guys have been around for a long time. Peter Laviolette's been a coach for a long time, and so it may not necessarily be a brand new message, but maybe just a different approach to this team. What's been the biggest difference that's allowed the Rangers to have such early season success?
Well, I think it's the overall buy-in. Gerard Gallant was very outspoken about not having to go into the room and motivate the players. I think there are different approaches like that where coaches allow the players to, manage themselves. But sometimes I think even as pro athletes, you need a little kick in the ass sometimes. And I think that's what Laviolette brings. And, I talked about it a little bit today in the Fantasy on Ice podcast in the NHL. And, I was saying, it kind of reminds me of like 10 years ago with John Tortorella, like the black and blue shirt mentality, right? They're playing a little bit more of a blue collar style as opposed to the last few years where, Panarin comes in and dangles, turns it over, and maybe is a little bit lazy on the back check. This year, you see Panarin playing very well defensively, and that's leading to offense. Laviolette preaches having the D lead to scoring chances because you see it in the neutral zone. Keandre Miller, Adam Fox, their gaps are way better. They're stepping up at the red line as opposed to sitting back and allowing the attack and accepting the rush. They're now going for it. They're aggressive. They know when to pinch. They sit back in that 1-2-2 or 1-3-1, whichever one, I guess at the point of the game. It's just very more X's and O. And listen, I don't think X's and O's are everything, but when you have something that you can fall back on, it just makes the game so much easier. And I think that's what they've lacked over the last couple seasons is that foundation and structure. So I think right now you just kind of see everyone is learning a little bit about where to be, where to find a guy, and the next play to make, which I think is so important in hockey because everything happens so fast. And, obviously you want to think the game, right? But you don't want to take more than 2 seconds to think about making a play because that's when you get yourself in trouble. So I think just the overall buy-in and Laviolette's motivation and communication has been the biggest difference, I'd say.
Well, and I found it interesting too, because as you had noted early on in the season, just the level of practicing that this team has been doing compared to what they've done in previous years. And, we may brush it off at points throughout the season, but the attention to detail is really where teams can shine or can be exposed. And so it seems like that's been a huge, from my perspective, huge difference for this team too, is that they're really getting into those key areas in practice.
Yeah, and I think it's important to stress that now this time of year, right? Because after the All-Star break, second half, practices are a little bit more leisurely, or I don't even know if I said that right, but you know what I mean? They're kind of like maintenance days and whatnot. Yep. So you want to take care of the body, but you also want to know the time to push the players and the time to be hard on them. And I think, October, November, actually, I think Bob Wischusen, I hope I said his name right. I know it's a mouthful. Bob Wischusen, tweeted, I think like a couple hours ago saying that the first 2 months of the NHL season are so important. Like, I think if you're in a playoff spot at the end of October, 67% of those teams make the playoffs. And then by Thanksgiving, 80% of those teams make the playoffs. So, as I know, these couple months here are so critical and so important that Laviolette's pushing the right buttons at the right time.
Yeah, and it's led to an incredible start, 7-2, I believe, to start the season. Now, obviously, we're recording this before the Thursday night game, but just finished off a 5-game road trip in which the Rangers won every single game. And, that speaks to a team playing well early as well, is being able to go on the road into some tough environments and not get flustered, just play your style and come away with wins. So I would imagine that has led to some good vibes for the Rangers early on, being able to complete the 5-game road trip and go 5-0.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the vibes I don't think could be any higher or couldn't be any higher. Excuse me. I think just going in and winning games where you probably don't deserve to win. And I think the Rangers are honest about that. Like that Vancouver game, they probably shouldn't have won. And I'm not saying that's because of that questionable call at the end. Just Vancouver was the better team, at least for the majority of the game. And Peter Laviolette said it, and I've stressed on it a bunch early on that you're going to have to find different ways to win. Like, you're not going to play a perfect game every night. Your best players aren't going to be the best players every night. Who's going to step up in a time where, someone makes a mistake? How are you going to own up for it? And I think, a big play that was made was Adam Fox in that game against Vancouver. He turns the puck over on the power play. Tyler Myers comes down and scores to make it 2-1. Vancouver then dominates on the penalty kill for the next 2-3 minutes. The Rangers get a lucky break. Vancouver takes a too many men penalty. Who scores the tying goal? Adam Fox. Who has the go ahead assist? Adam Fox. Just making up for your mistakes. And I think that's a big maturity thing. And I think just having those things happen on the road when there aren't any outside distractions, you're getting meals with the team, you're kind of just in it together for 11 days. It just gels you so well. And I'm curious to see how they come home on Thursday night against the Hurricanes and how they perform in front of the home crowd. Because it's been a while since they played a home game, and their last home game was a terrible effort.
Well, we'll see how things play out there. I want to dive in because, again, like I said, I don't know what it's like to have good special teams because the Wild do not right now. And so we'll just take a look at the special teams. We'll talk goaltending. We've got a lot more coming for you as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Parkview Advance. As a business owner, you realize there are times when receivables might fall behind, but that doesn't mean you need to fall behind on vendor payments, payroll, or rent. For more than 25 years, Parkview Advance has helped businesses secure working capital. From $5,000 to $1.5 million, Parkview Advance can approve your working capital in as little as 24 hours. It's a much easier process than you might imagine. We invite the many entrepreneurs that are Locked On NHL fans to learn more by calling us at 203-675-0071 or go to parkviewadvance.com. If your business needs working capital, call Parkview Advance today. Parkview Advance, helping businesses with their working capital. Go to parkviewadvance.com. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topal joined by Jonny, Lazarus of the Blue Crew podcast, amongst other places, talking New York Rangers as we get set for Saturday's game against the Minnesota Wild. Let's talk power play, because the Rangers power play currently second in the NHL at, I believe, 34% success so far. The Wild's further down the list. And so what has been, Jonny, the key for this Rangers power play to have started off as well as they have?
Well, I think it all starts with Adam Fox. He is, and I've argued this now for a couple of weeks, probably the best power play quarterback in the NHL. And you can make the case for Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, like even Dougie Hamilton's name is in the mix. There's a lot of skilled defensemen out there, but I don't think anyone thinks the game as good as Foxy does. I think his ability to create space and time for the other four guys on this unit by, having patience, waiting an extra second, a couple head fakes to bring the penalty killers in, to open up Zibanejad, open up Panarin, find Kreider for a backdoor tip in, just get the puck to the net. He's just a very simple player. And I think he's the biggest difference for this first unit. Obviously, Panarin's playing out of this world right now, 9-game point streak to start the year. And he's been more aggressive as far as shooting goes. He's had more of a shoot first mentality where, the past couple of years, the Rangers were a little too cute trying to make the extra pass. And the crazy thing about it is that Zibanejad is just now getting going. He's got 2 goals on the year, only 1 on the power play. And he's their number 1 look on the power play is, trying to get the puck to Panarin coming downhill with speed across the Royal Road to Zibanejad for the one-timer. And they haven't been going in yet this year, but once they start going in, he's going to fill the net. So I think just, having the personnel that they have on that unit, where anyone at any given point is a threat to score, and that should be for the case for the most teams in the NHL. But you can't really speak to the talent level that the Rangers have on that first unit. Like it's incredible, and they've been doing it now together for basically 3 years. I mean, it doesn't really matter who's in Trocheck's spot at this point. Those 4 guys, Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin, and Fox, just have unbelievable chemistry.
Yeah, I'm getting worried. I'm getting worried right off the bat, because not only that, but the Rangers penalty kill is just under 84% at last check. And so power play has been great. Penalty kill has been holding their own as well. And it just leads to a scenario where you really have to try to keep this game 5-on-5. And so if the Wild commit a bunch of penalties, it feels like the Rangers are going to be able to capitalize.
Yeah, I believe it was a 7 spot last year when the Rangers went to Minnesota. That was a tough game for your Wild. Oh my God, that was rough. And that was like the 3rd or 4th game of the year, right? That was pretty early.
That was opening night.
Oh, that was opening night for you guys?
For us. Yeah.
Oh,
opening night at home. Great start.
Yeah.
Great start. Oh man. And not only that is you look at all these different elements. I was looking at the stats for the Rangers. They're averaging like 3.1 goals per game, giving up 2. And so not only do you have all these weapons on offense, but the defense is playing well. Oh, and you've got one of the best goalies in the NHL in Igor Shesterkin as well. Yeah, talk to me about that a little bit. Jonathan Quick to start the season, obviously brought in as a vet, as a backup. But what have we seen from him in kind of just being part of that goalie room with Shesterkin so far?
I thought you were going to say they have one of the best goalies in the league in Jonathan Quick, because he's been lights out. It's funny, we make the joke now that the Rangers have a goalie controversy. But all good fun. Jonathan Quick, and honestly, for whatever reason, when I first tweeted it this summer that the Rangers were signing him, everyone was like, I said it's a good mentor for Igor Shesterkin. And people were like, he's already won a Vezina. He's 27. He doesn't need a mentor. Like, what the hell are you talking about? And I'm like, anytime you bring in a 3-time Stanley Cup champion, and sure, we can like put a star on that third one because it was in Vegas last year. But, you know, a Conn Smythe winner, one of the best American goalies of all time, to just be there for Shesterkin. I think it's done wonders for their relationship. And, you know, obviously Shesterkin hasn't been, you know, inhuman as he's been in the past, but he's been solid this year. And I think he's, you know, he stole that game in Vancouver. He played a great game against Calgary. You know, I'm sure there's goals he wishes he could have back, but Jonathan Quick has come in now, played 2 games, relieved Igor in 1 game, looked phenomenal against Nashville, goes into Seattle, lets up 1, puts up a shutout against Edmonton. I mean, and he's doing it at an old age. Like, I think it's probably very motivating for him to turn back the clock and play for his childhood team. And his preseason was not very strong, so I'm sure that motivated him as well. But also, you got to credit the team in front of him. And the Rangers, you know, you touched on their defensive numbers, but I think they also right now are allowing the least amount of shots on goal as far as the NHL goes too.
Wow,
they're just doing a lot of good things, way better than Minnesota's doing.
Yeah, it's a great start to the season, which is something that, you know, I would just love to be part of one of those sometime, as opposed to what happened last year, what's happening this year. It's taking this team from a Wild perspective a little while to get going, and it's not how you start, it's how you finish. But again, I'll throw out there, you hit it right on the head, is those barometers at the end of October and then at Thanksgiving. Tried and true. It's not like that's just some formula that came up here within the last couple of years. It's like, if you're in a playoff spot by Thanksgiving, you're probably in good shape. And so you got to pick up the pace here in November. And it's just a gauntlet of a schedule against not only the Rangers, but also the New York Islanders, the other New York team, the Devils, Buffalo Sabres. And so I am hoping for a good start, at least against the Rangers, but I don't know. I'm not optimistic. It feels like a Rangers team that's playing outrageously good hockey right now.
Well, also when you compare the numbers, like you think Minnesota doesn't have much of a shot right now with the way their goaltending is, and you know, goals. I think, what are they, the worst goals against in the league, right?
Yeah.
Yep. 4.11. Yeah, that 4 number isn't pretty. So like, no. So really, you know, obviously we talked about keeping the game at 5-on-5, but even at that point, like, it's going to be tough to stop them.
Yeah, and I have talked about this quite a bit, because even in the instances that the Wild have had an opportunity to keep things 5-on-5, you can't turn the puck over in the defensive zone, and that has been one of the things that has hurt them, I think, the most. And for the Rangers, I'm sure pretty opportunistic in the turnover department and pretty capable of scoring off of those types of opportunities right in front of the opposing goalie.
Yeah, I watched one Minnesota Wild game complete this year because I had the money line against the Flyers in Philadelphia, and that was a very disappointing and ugly performance, and I refused. They're on my my don't bet list right now.
I can't blame you. that Flyers game might have been the worst of the season. That's bad. Well, I want to ask you, as well as we finish today, Johnny, about a little bit about the Eastern Conference, because we don't get a chance to dip our toes into the East all that much. But obviously some surprises, and the Rangers, one of the better teams so far. So we'll just we'll talk about a few things of the Eastern Conference to finish as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after that. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by BetterHelp. This time of year can be a lot for some people, with the holidays, hockey season underway, and it can lead to a lot of feelings of stress and anxiety. But by adding something new and positive to your life, you can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot amid all the stress and change, something to look forward to make you feel grounded and to give you the tools to manage everything going on. And as someone who has been in therapy myself, I cannot endorse enough the fact that it does make a difference by giving you positive coping skills to handle what is going on in your life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime at no additional charge. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNHL. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topal and Jonny Lazarus finishing things up here today. And Jonny, the Rangers off to a great start. I think to the surprise of a lot of people, we have seen some of these same culprits from last year to this year in good spots so far here this year in the East. But I want to talk about the Islanders in particular because we've got them coming up too. New York not doing too bad to start the season, but it's not an Islanders team that's flashy. It's not a flashy style they play. Very slow, very defensive. And I don't know. What are your thoughts from what you've had? Have you had a chance to really dive in at all to the Islanders so far this season?
Well, we haven't seen them, so I haven't watched too much of them, but I did catch their game against Detroit the other night, and that was an ugly third period blown lead to the Red Wings, but kudos to the Red Wings. They've been unbelievable so far this year, especially offensively. Just very uncharacteristic of the Islanders, I'd say, to blow a 2-0 lead in the third. Obviously Matt Barzal's cooking. I love watching him play. He's one of the prettiest skaters I've seen in the NHL, and I think Horvat's been a huge addition, obviously, in his first full season. The Islanders, again, their power play is probably their biggest issue. They just don't have that shoot first mentality outside of Brock Nelson. But again, I feel like the Islanders and Minnesota are very similar teams.
Yeah.
Where they're both, and I don't mean this as such an insult, but they're both just very mid, right? I've insulted the Wild before. I call them the Minnesota Wild because they, basically just, I feel like they're the same thing every year. Where the Islanders, obviously they had those 2 back-to-back runs to the conference final. But, you basically kind of know what you're going to get from them every year, right? So, I think that'd be a very evenly matched game. But again, I don't watch too much of the Islanders right now. But obviously the goaltending, I would say, is the biggest difference in that matchup. Is the Islanders tandem is insane and Minnesota's is the opposite.
Yeah, it's just been a struggle. It's pretty much
so down.
I know. It's like I've tried to spin optimism so far this season, but then we get to a matchup like this, and I just see all these just nice looking, clean numbers that the Rangers have for them this season, and it just kind of puts me in a sad mood because I want all that and we don't have it. But just kind of sticking in the Metropolitan Division a little bit, looking at the standings, the Pittsburgh Penguins dead last at 3-6 overall. New Jersey right now is 5-2-1, but they definitely have not been playing at the same level that they did last year. Which one surprises you more?
Well, I kind of expected this from the Devils, to be honest. I was very against all the hype they were getting, and no disrespect to them. I think they're a great team, and obviously I know the Ranger-Devil rivalry, whatever, but I said, has there ever been a case in NHL history where a team wins one playoff series in a decade and then all of a sudden they're a Stanley Cup contender? I know they did well in the offseason and got a lot of big names, and they clicked well last year, but, you don't just go from mid-level to, top-tier level in 1 year.
Right.
Obviously we have seen some cases of that happening. Obviously the Vegas Golden Knights first season comes to mind, but you know what I mean? All these good teams, they're knocking at the door. The Colorado Avalanches, it took them a while to get over the hump. Even that early Pittsburgh Penguins team, the Blackhawks teams that, won a lot of cups, it took them a couple years to lose and then find a way to win. And this is no discredit to the Devils. I think they're an incredible team on paper. Their goaltending is their biggest issue, but I would say that Pittsburgh being last in the Metropolitan is the bigger surprise. And it's actually funny. I was doing this research today, and this is actually a positive for the Minnesota Wild, is that the West is way more wide open. Right now, the Eastern Conference only has three teams that are under 500. So everyone in the East is winning games, which makes it a dogfight. At the end of 1 month, of course, it's early, but there's 7 in the Western Conference. So the West is a little bit more spread out and wide open. But that just goes to show you how competitive the Eastern Conference and the Metropolitan Division is.
I want to ask you as well. I know you are on the Ottawa Senators train, so I have to make things a little rough for you here today because
more like getting hit by the train.
Yeah, so they get now the news that they're going to get penalized for being part of that Evgeny Dadonov trade. And I don't know, at what point do the Ottawa Senators finally get over this hump that they have not been able to jump over, which is to be a playoff caliber team? It seems like every year they just are crushed under the expectations.
Well, they got off to a really good start. I was feeling great about that. And they're still, I think they're still 4-4-0. It's not like they're out of it. But I feel like just anything that could go wrong for this organization in the last couple of days has gone wrong, right? I don't want to dive into the Pinto thing, but obviously that's a huge loss for them. 20-goal scorer, really strong down the middle. Their top six is what stood out to me, though, and their decor and Shabbat and Sanderson and Chikrin, they have so much skill on that team. Korpisalo, obviously, they signed him to that long deal, and I think he's a capable enough goalie to get them to the playoffs. But I was really drawn to Brady Tkachuk. I think Brady Tkachuk is probably the best captain in the NHL right now. Just as far as his mentality, his toughness, his personality, that guy can do it all. And I'm blanking on your original question right now. Was it why can't the Senators get out of their own way or something?
Yeah, why does it seem like they can never? They have all these playoff expectations and they just can never match them.
Well, this just seems like shit luck, to be honest. And organizational mistakes. It's not like it's the on ice performance that's causing this stuff right now. It's more so the away from the ice problems that are, creeping into the room a bit. So, I don't want to write them off right away, but I was like, oh my God, I'm a genius. Now I'm like, oh shit, but I did say the Canucks are going to make the playoffs too. So I'm pumped about that one. Again, we're only in October, but yeah, I think Ottawa still has a lot of room to turn around. Tim Stützle, I'd like to see him score a little bit more. He's playing well, producing points, but not scoring enough. But Brady's been great. Chikrin's been great. Sanderson is a hell of a player. They have a good squad. They can really figure it out.
Yeah, most definitely. Final one for you before we let you plug where everybody can find everything that you do for the NHL. Patrick Kane going to take some time for a decision. I don't know if it's even close to happening or imminent. Obviously played with the Rangers after the deadline last year. Do the Rangers end up being the team that he goes back to at some point this season, or has that ship kind of sailed with how the Rangers are playing so far?
Well, I think if anything, with how they're playing, it's more attractive to him to come back, right? I think he understands what he's getting here. And from what I understand, he enjoyed his time here last year, despite the ending to the season. But you look at the Rangers right now, and this is interesting, right? Because a lot of the talk is Kakko Lafreniere, and I don't want to take Kakko out of that, first line right wing spot, but he's only put up 2 points so far. He's played fine. Has he played exceptionally and well enough to stay there all year? I don't know. The Rangers 5-5 best line right now is that second line with Panarin, Hedl, and Lafreniere, and they've been dominant. I think fans and I think the team would expect Kakko to have a little bit more of production to this point, but I still think it could come. With that said, the Blake Wheeler experiment, he's been on that third line and he's not really much of a third line player. And I think if there's a way to bring in Kane, you mix and match those guys. There's room for him to fit here if the money obviously works out. But, I have to imagine the Buffalo thing now is a little bit less attractive with how they started. I think they're the biggest disappointment right now, right? They're the sexiest team coming in. And they're in last in the Atlantic. So rough one there. And then the other teams he's rumored to go to were Detroit, which is probably a sexy pick as well right now with how they're playing. And who's the other team? Dallas? Was it Dallas?
I think it was Dallas, yeah.
And I mean, Dallas is they're an elite contender for sure.
They're a wagon.
Yeah, they're a wagon. But also, again, Robo hasn't gotten going yet. Rupe Hintz is, he's got 3 goals, 6 games, fine. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Rangers just unfinished business, it kind of seems like.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it too. We'll see if that happens. We'll see if the Wilds can not get bagged by their special teams being off to a rough start by the Rangers. But Jonny, before we let you go, got to let you plug where people can find your content. I know you'll be doing a preview write-up for the game on Saturday for the hockey news. And so just let us know where everybody can find everything.
Well, before I go, I don't want to make this about me. I want to ask you a question. If the Wild are going to beat the Rangers on Saturday night, who's going to be the difference maker for Minnesota?
It's got to be whoever's in net. We got to get a standout performance in net by either Philip Gustafsson or Marc-Andre Fleury. And I'm not talking about like making the saves that they're supposed to make. I'm talking like limit the Rangers to maybe one or two goals on, because it's going to be a deluge of shots. The Wild have been outshot quite a bit this season so far. So whether it be facing 35, 40, 45 shots, or in the case of the game against Columbus, 53, I know I can't with that one.
Our vibes
it's got to
so
be,
opposite.
it's been something. It's got to be one of the goalies. They just got to have a standout performance, stand on their head, and just take some pressure off of the defense. Can't matter what's going on in front of you. Just go make some saves.
I think you might see Quick.
Oh, okay.
We'll
okay.
See.
How would Fleury Quick be? Fun little matchup between the two.
Yeah, a little turn back in time. I'm all for that. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think a good narrative for sure, right? I don't think they never faced each other in the final. No, they didn't. No, Pittsburgh played Detroit and then San Jose and Nashville. But yeah, I think that'd be fun. Like, two old guys going at it. Maybe even see a goalie fight or something. Who knows?
I'm still waiting for one. Fleury wants to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Probably going to save that for Binnington, though.
Yeah.
I'm sure they've got unfinished business. Well, Johnny, just let us know where the folks can find you so that they can tune into the Rangers all season long.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. I post everything basically on Twitter. JLazzy23, just find me there, and I put all my stuff there, including my favorite desserts and snacks and movies and all that stuff. So, Seth, I appreciate you, and it's always fun hopping on. And I hope your sadness continues until Saturday night, and then I hope it turns around.
Yeah, that's the best part about it is it's a Saturday night game, so you can go Saturday night into Sunday and just have a good time and forget about it, whatever happens. So, Johnny, you're the best. We'll see you down the road. Wild fans, make sure that you follow along with Locked On Wild all season long so you don't miss out on any great episodes like these. We have new content for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.